Etude number 1 is marked giocoso, which means playfully. So it should have kind of a fun, bubbly, bouncy feel to it. When you're first learning this one, I strongly recommend having the 8th note getting the beat. So it's in 6/8 time. That means there's going to be 6 eighth notes in the bar, and the 8th note gets the beat. So bum, buddy, bum, bum, bee, bum, bum, buddy, ba, ba, bee, bum. If you take the slower tempo, not only will you make sure that you have correct rhythm, but it'll give you an opportunity to catch all of these articulations and the dynamics. In this one, there are some big contrasts between the dynamics. It starts forte, and then 2 measures later, it goes mezzo piano, which I think of it as a subito mezzo piano. You can kind of play around with it and decide if you like a decrescendo or if you'd rather get suddenly smaller in that point. Either way, make sure that we're really hearing a big difference between your loud, your forte, and your mezzo piano. In fact, I usually suggest scratching out the mezzo so that you're just focused on piano, a softer dynamic, so we really hear the contrast. Don't forget at the end that the dynamic starting in measure 7 is forte, and it stays forte all the way until the second to last measure, where we get a rallentando, so to slow down, and a diminuendo to get quieter, al fine, to the end, right? So once you get to those last 2 measures, that's where you start to decrescendo and slow down. Etude number 2 is marked andante, which means a walking tempo. And you can see it is marked quarter note equals 96. I actually feel like this tempo is a tiny bit fast for this one. I think if you took it a little bit slower and it had a nice lyrical, smooth feel to it, that would be okay. The marked tempo is 96 though, and so if you have it going closer to that gold tempo, make sure it's still staying very relaxed, very smooth, which can be really difficult with all these big slurred intervals, right? So make sure that you're playing around with those. Spend time going, for example, from F sharp down slur into B, and practice what does my air and my vowel shape inside of my mouth, how do I need to position things so that those down slurs come out cleanly. The other tricky thing that really catches people off guard, there's actually 2 things. One is this 3, the triplets that are in measure 5, that then 2 measures later in measure 7, we've got 16th notes. So as you're practicing this, always use a metronome. Make sure that you're being very rhythmically accurate. Triplet, 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 1 and 2. 1, ba-da-be-da-bum-bum, ba-da-be-da-bum. I recommend breaking the ties actually in measures 7 and 8 while you're getting really comfortable with that rhythm. Most people are going to have a tendency to hold their ties a little too long, which means that their 16th notes will be very compressed. So show that you can count that rhythm correctly and you'll really stand out. The other thing that's very tricky is in measure 10, it is a half note followed by a quarter note. For some reason, this really catches people off guard, and I hear a lot of people that want to play it as a dotted quarter note followed by an 8. So be very mindful. That is a half note followed by a quarter note right there. Etude number 3 is marked jauntily. So similar to number 1, it's going to feel fun and bouncy, but it's going to have a little bit more angular feel to it. It is marked half note equals 96, right? So it's in cut time. As you are learning this, absolutely go with a slower tempo with the quarter note getting the beat. Beam, bum, be da da da, beam, bum, and speed it up gradually. This is the big technical etude out of the first 3. There's some very tricky things in the fingers. Remember that when you go to perform this at the audition, if you are playing this at a slightly slower tempo than half note equals 96 and it's clean, it's going to sound better than somebody that is playing it at half note equals 96, but it's not going cleanly, right? Because the judges won't be able to hear all of the notes and hear that they're able to observe all of the dynamic markings and all of the articulations. So it's okay if it's not up to half note equals 96 by audition day. Get it as clean as you can at the fastest tempo that you can. The dynamics in this one, we've got this decrescendo into measure 12 that takes us to mezzo piano. I recommend, as always, scratching out the mezzo and really just aim for a piano. Keep it soft all the way through that last line. That'll make the fortissimo accented note at the end really stand out from the texture and give it that kind of fun, jaunty kind of feel. Etude number 4 is another technical etude. It switches between 6/8 and 2/4 throughout the etude, and the 8th note is what stays the same. So as you're learning this one, put the 8th note on. Maybe 8th note equals 120. Dum, 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 dee, dum, bum, beam, bum, baka, dum, bee, dum, bum, beam, bum, right? That way you get the rhythm really solid and steady. That'll also give you time to observe all of these different dynamics, lots of contrasting dynamics in this, lots of tricky articulations. There are accents that need to be observed. There are some tricky slurs. So as you're working on this, again, slow, 8th note gets the beat. Check out all of these forte, subito piano, forte, subito piano changes. Make sure you're really communicating that to your audience. In the beginning, don't worry too much about the molto retards that are in measures 8 and measure 18. For now, in the early stages of learning them, just play straight through. As you get more comfortable, as you start playing it a little bit faster, you can play around with slowing those down. What you want to make sure of, though, is that when you hit the odd tempos that are after those, that means back to your start tempo, right? Diga daga dum bum 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 beam baga dum be dum bum be da dum ba da dum beam. So just be aware, if you start to incorporate those rallentandos, that we go right back to odd tempo where it's marked in the next measures. And those molto retards, and so actually molto retards, not rallentandos, those molto retards, everybody can do those a little bit differently. It's really up to you to kind of play around with it and see what you like, what feels better. But you can really, I think, kind of ham it up and stretch those out and take some time. Also be aware, starting in measure 18, it's marked piano, and it never goes up again. So the end of this one should stay nice and quiet. Etude number 5 is another slow lyrical etude, and this one's actually my favorite. It's in a minor key, so it's got kind of a sad, spooky feeling to it. It's another one with big slurred leaps. So that's going to be the big focus, is making sure that you can slur up and then slur back down cleanly without any extra noises in between. There are a lot of hairpin dynamics, so you'll get an opportunity to show off how you can crescendo and decrescendo. Just in general with this one, I'd say just really kind of try to sing through it, right? Maybe come up with some kind of story that goes with it. You know, I said it was in a minor key, so it's kind of got a little bit of a sad feeling to it. Maybe come up with some kind of story. Maybe you're a character that's telling a story about something that happened to you, and kind of sing through this and tell us about your experience. I think that's the best way to have this one really sound cohesive and catch the listener's attention. It ends very, very softly, pianissimo. It's the softest dynamic we have in the etudes. So really push yourself to see if you can get that dynamic nice and soft at the end. And then the fermata, remember fermatas are usually about time and a half. So it's the eighth note's getting the beat, it's in 4/8, so that half note gets 4 beats, right? And then maybe another 2 beats or so for the fermata. That gives you 6 total beats to get a really nice hairpin, kind of bring us up and then bring us back down for the end of the piece.